Okay, welcome everyone to the Siyum of Bava Kama, Masechta that we've been learning now for just about 4 months, right? It's 118 blot, and Baruch Hashem, this Masechta, we went through a lot of different inyanim. Let's get straight to the Siyum, which is right here, Kuf Yutes Amud Beis. So we stopped today at the Gemara where it says Hachayit. It's a little bit past halfway down the Amud, beginning of the line, and this is the Gemara quoting here from the last Mishnah of the Masechta. There's a Gemara here. If anyone passed on a Gemara, there's this. Yeah. So in the last Mishnah of this Masechta, the Mishnah speaks about various different people that are doing work for someone, and they get materials to do the work. And then there's leftovers from the work that they do. The question is, those leftovers, does it have to be returned to the original owner, or could the worker keep it? So this part of the Mishnah that the Gemara is going to discuss speaks about a tailor, a chayit. Okay, so Zak the Gemara, a chayit, come please. Hachayit shashir esachut, a tailor that has leftovers from the thread that he got to sew a garment. So the Mishnah there said that if the leftovers of the thread is the size of the needle that's used to sew, so then, but the Mishnah actually didn't say the exact share, sorry. The Mishnah just said if there's enough of the thread left over that you can sew with it, so then you have to return it to the balabas. But the Mishnah didn't specify what that share is. So the Gemara here says what the share is. Sagt the Gemara Kama litfer. When the Mishnah says that as long as you have leftover enough that you can sew with it, what is that shear? Amar Ravasi, so Ravasi says, Maloi machat v'chutz l'machat. That's thread that's as big as the needle itself, and also more than that, more than the size of the needle itself. That's the shear. So now this the Gemara asks, when it says more than the size of the needle itself, it doesn't specify what does that mean, more than the size of the needle itself. So the Shiloh was asked about this. When it says like the size of the needle and more than the needle itself, does that mean machat? That size outside, more than the size of the needle itself, does that mean that that additional size is also like the size of the needle itself? Which basically means it has to be a thread that's double the length of the needle. Then you have to give that back to the owner. Or maybe as long as you have the size of the needle and just a drop more, that's a size of thread that you have to return to the owner. Toshama, the Gemara brings a right to this. The Tanya, in Hebraisa, we learned about this halacha of the tailor as follows. Hachayit, sheshir esachot, a tailor that left over from this, has leftovers from this thread, and it's pachais michdei litfarbay. The thread is less than what you can sew with it. And umatlis, or a piece of garment, she pchusa mishalash al shalis, which is smaller than 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths, which is the shear that it said in the Mishnah, that if it's 3 by 3 finger breadths, it's large enough that you have to return. So this is less than that. So here, this Braisa says that it will depend on the balabas, the owner, if he's particular about this. If the balabas is makpid, harei l'shel balabais, so then we return it to the balabais. Ein balabais makpid, and if he's not particular about this, then harei l'sheloi, then the tailor can keep this. So the Gemara now explains. If you're going to say that the shear here is that the thread, when we say that you must return it, it's when the thread is double the size of the needle. So then, pachis mikan, when it says here in this Braise that the thread is less than that size, what does it mean? It's not double the size of the needle, it's a little bit less than that. So then I could understand why the Braise would say that the owner may be particular and he wants that size of thread back because it's useful for something. Chazi l'sichse. This could be used for sichse. Sichse goes back to something the Gemara mentioned before here. When they make a garment and they have to stretch out the garments, when they finished making it, they would make loops on the side of it to hang it, to be able to stretch it out. So for those loops, you can use this small thread to make those loops. But if you're going to say that the shear of what you always must return to the owner is when it's the size of a needle, and just to drop more, pachis mikan. So now this brayso that speaks of even less than that, a shorter piece of thread than that. Lamai chazi. What could this be used for? Can't be used for anything. How would this brisa say that if the owner is particular about it, you have to return it to him? How could he be particular about it? It's that tiny piece of thread. You can't use it for anything. Ela shma mina, so therefore it must be malay machat, v'chutz lamachat, kim loy machat, shma mina. That when we said before that the size of thread that you must return, it's because it's double the size of the needle. That's something that you for sure have use out of it. You return it to the owner. If it's a little less than that, then it'll depend on the particular person, if he's particular about this or not. The next thing it said in the Mishnah, the Gemara quotes here, Mashacheresh chulu, regarding a carpenter. So when it comes to a carpenter that's working with wood, he's doing woodwork and he's cutting it, he's shaving it, he's whatever it is. So the Mishnah said that the pieces of wood that fall off during this job, it depends how large these sizes of pieces of wood are that fell off, whether you have to return it to the owner or not. And the Mishnah made a difference. What kind of a tool are you using? There's one tool the Mishnah called a matzid. I don't know the exact translation in English of this. The matzid is basically a small axe. When you use it to cut the pieces of wood, the very small pieces of wood come off. So therefore that's something that you don't have to return to the owner. And then the Mishnah says there's a case of a kashel, which is basically a big axe. When you chop this wood, big pieces of wood come off. So the Mishnah made the distinction, if it's with a matzid, you don't have to return it to the owner, it's small pieces of wood. If it's with a kashil, which is a big axe, you have to return to the owner. So the Gemara here asks a contradiction on this distinction of the Mishnah from what it said in a Braisa. Veramini, I'll ask you the following contradiction. The Braisa says, Mashacharesh moitzi b'matzid, when you have a carpenter and he's using this matzid, this small axe, v'hanifsek b'megireh, and there are pieces of wood that chips of wood that come off when you are sawing the wood, harei l'shel balabayis. They both belong to the balabayis. So this is not like the Mishnah said. The Mishnah said with a matzid, it's a small axe and it's small pieces of wood, the carpenter can keep it for himself. Then the Braisa says, when you're drilling a hole and you have sawdust that comes out from the wood, or mitachas rehitni, or if you're using another tool, a rehitni is a plane, also the sawdust that comes out, or v'hanigre b'megireh, or when you're sawing and it's the sawdust that comes out, harei l'shaloi. All of that, you can keep it for yourself. Today the sawdust is used for, that's what they make, what is it called, particle board or something like that. They use it, you can actually use it to make something really valuable out of it. Anyways, okay. So the point is that you have over here a stira regarding this matzah. The Mishnah makes a distinction between the large axe, the small axe, and the Braisa doesn't make that distinction. Rava answers, Ba'asre, the Tana Didon, in the Mishnah, the Tana of the Mishnah, the place where he lived, Iketar Tichatzini. There were two different kinds of axes. L'rabasi kari le'kashel, the big axe refers to as a kashel, or l'zutris kari le'matzah. The small axe is referred to as a matzah. So there's a distinction in the kinds of pieces of wood that fall off in this job. So the Mishnah makes that distinction. Ba'asr the Tana Bra, however, the Tana of the Braisa, chadu deke. There was just one kind of axe that they used, the kari la matzah. And he calls it a matzah. The matzah is not necessarily a small axe. It's just the name of the axe, the one kind of axe that they had, that they used, and the woods, the chips of wood that come out from this are large enough that you have to return to the owner. Okay, the next thing the Gemara quotes what it said in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that all of these different works that the Mishnah spoke about, that sometimes you have to return the leftovers to the owner, sometimes not. That's all if you're doing the work for the owner in your own shop. The tailor in his shop, or the carpenter in his shop, whatever it is. But if you're doing the work in the house of the balabas, so then whatever leftovers you have to return to the balabas. It's in his house, you have to leave it for him. The Gemara brings a braisa that speaks about other cases where a person is doing work that the Mishnah did not mention. Tana Rabbana, we learned in the braisa, misasese avonim, a worker which is chiseling stones to smooth them out, to make them nice and square, to be able to build with it. Ein behem mishum gezel. So the pieces that fall from these stones, there's no issue of gezel, you can keep it. Mefaske ilonois, people that do work to prune trees. Mefaske kfanim, pruning vineyards. Menakfe higi, people that are trimming bushes. Menachshe zroim, weeding plants. V'oidre yirokes, or when you have vegetables that grow very close together in a garden and the person wants to give them space to spread out, so sometimes you pull out some of the vegetables to give it more space to grow. So Rashi explains this. Now, bisman shabalabais makbed aleim. So here, regarding all these cases, the Brisa says there's a distinction. It will depend whether the owner is particular about these things. If he's particular, yesh ben mishum gezel, so that you can't keep it, you have to give it back to him. Ein balabais makbed aleim. If he's not particular about this, harei l'shalai, you can keep this. The last halacha of the Mishnah, quoted of the Gemara, that is quoted here in the Brisa, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, kishus, which is some kind of greenery, some kind of grass that grows. V'chaziz, which is the grain that grows before it's ripe, and sometimes it's cut when it's not ripe yet to give it as animal feed. Ein be'em mishum gezel. So there's no gezel for this because it's something that the owner is not makbid on this. However, ba'asri, the kopti, if it's a place where you know that people do have a use out of this, and the people are particular about this, yesh be'em mishum gezel, so then there is gezel. Amar Ravina said about this case here, Masa Machasya, the city of Masa Machasya, Asr the Koptihu. This is a place that this kind of animal feed, they were very particular about it, because in Rashi, as Rashi says, let's see the last Rashi of the Masechta, Masa Machasya, Mokaim Behemisu. Masa Machasya was a place with a lot of cattle, Utzrichin Lemiretayv, and they need a lot of good pasture for the animals, so therefore, these greenery or this animal feed is something that you can't just take it. It's the owner is very particular about it. Hadran Allah Chagoizl Basra Aslikala Mesechta Bava Kama. Okay, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. So, yeah, just first share a short word on the actual Siyum itself, and then maybe someone wants to say a Kaddish, and then I'll share Mitzvah a word of the Rebbe, the Sicha, the Hadran of the Rebbe on the Mesechta. So the Vart of the Marsha, which is very interesting regarding the Siyum of the Masechta, the Marsha points out that the last two words of the Masechta, it says, Umasa Machasya Asr de Kopti Hu. It says the word Hu in the end of the Gemara is extra. Should have just said Asr de Kopti. People are particular about this animal feed. But the Gemara didn't want to finish off with the word Kepeda. Kepeda has a negative connotation. So the Gemara adds the word Hu. It says similar in Rashi. Rashi says, Utzrichin lemire toiv. They need good mireh, good pasture. Why does Rashi add the word toiv? Rashi didn't want to finish off with the word mireh, he wanted to finish off with the word toiv. Furthermore, the Marsha says the word mireh has in it the words ra'ah. So Rashi didn't want to finish off with a word that has in it the words ra'ah, so he says the word toiv. Then the Marsha says, Kopti hu, if you take the yud and you put it together with the hey vav aleph, he says yud hey vav aleph is similar to shem yud ke vav ke. It's not exactly the letters of shem yud ke vav ke because it has an aleph there, but it's similar to the shem yud ke vav ke. And he says also the word toiv, you put it together with the hey of lemire hat toiv. The hat toiv are similar letters to the yud hey vav and aleph. There are some of the letters are the same. You have the vav, which is the same, but even the tes is right near the yud. And the Vez is right near the Aleph. So Rashi and the Gemara are finishing off with two similar words to finish off on a positive note, hinting to the Eibishter's name and the word Taiv. That's what the Mashal says, how the Masechta finishes off. Okay. What's what said? Just say the Hadran. Hadran lach Masechta Bava Kama, Hadran Chalon, Daitan lach Masechta Bava Kama, Daitan Chalon, Lenis Nashim lach Masechta Bava Kama, Lenis Nashim lach Lebam Dem Lebam Dosi. Hadran lach Masechta Bava Kama, Hadran Chalon, Daitan lach Masechta Bava Kama, Daitan Chalon, Lenis Nashim lach Masechta Bava Kama, Lenis Nashim lach Lebam Dem Lebam Dosi. Hadran lach Masechta Bava Kama, Daitan Chalon, Daitan lach Masechta Bava Kama, Daitan Chalon, Lenis Nashim lach Masechta Bava Kama, Lenis Nashim lach Lebam Dem Lebam Dosi. Jetzt wenn nachher mal hin oder wir sind drachen ist der hey so das kommen wir sehen mal mal Papa nach mal Papa Papa Raf from Papa Papa Harf no dann ist es raus kommen wir sind kommen wir mir kommen nach kommen besser kommen jede nach aber das ist Sache weil wir doch mit Sache hier liebe sam kach mal leben Baruch atah Adonai Amen 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 Salavad Meide manachnu von nachher dann oder wir sind zusammen können wir besser mehr zusammen können wir Kranis أنا مشكلة لدبر السير بين مشكلة دار متيلم أنا ميلم كلام مسخار ميلم أنا مكلام مسخار أنا راتم أنا راتم خيال ما بين راتم بين شخص أنا بطلم تريد من شخص أنا شلون من باقي راتم فنا خاطر نايل هاي شيء مش هذا تاني لسايم مسخت بابا كما كنت زين لحاصل مسخت الصفار ما خير من لسايم للمود للعمد ليشمر بلاستس ولا كل دبر التالم تريسخ بابا سخوس كلات نايم وميرايم وتميد خامم يعمل لي لزاري شلي تامش atera mipi umipi zari vezera zari adolam v'siskayim bi b'salechacha tan chayisach v'shachbacha tishmor elecha v'kitzaysa his sichecha kivi yirbi yemecha v'siflecha shneis chayim oyrech yamim b'mina s'maylo shevachaved adnoi yizlam yitein adnoi yivarech esamim b'sholem. Someone wants to say a kaddish. Now's the time to say kaddish. And the Rebbe's Hadron to Masechta Bava Kama, it's Mamish Ashkach Pratis that we're finishing this week, Parshas Kisisa. The Rebbe's Hadron is based on a Hadron of the Rebbe Maharash. We have very little from the Rebbe Maharash and anything in Nigla, but the Rebbe Maharash, there's a short Rishime where the Rebbe Maharash said on a Kuda, a Hadron on Bava Kama, all based on a pasuk in this week's Parsha. What is it based on? In this week's Parsha, regarding the second Luchais, it says Psal Lucha. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu to carve out the luchais, to prepare the luchais. So the Gemara darshans on Lucha, Pselt and Shocha, that what he chisels from the luchais, what falls of it, belongs to Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Gemara says that this is what Moshe Rabbeinu got rich from, because it was expensive sampirinim. So the Rebbe Maharash asked, based on what we learned here in the last brayse in the Gemara, it says Misatete avonim ein ben mishum gazel. When you're chiseling stones and there's pieces that fall, then you don't have to return it to the owner. Why did the Eibishter have to say that extra word of Locha to Moshe Rabbeinu to let him know that he can keep the pieces that fall, if in any case it's hefker? The owner has no interest in them. So the Eibishter didn't have to tell him a special limud of Locha that he can keep it. So the Rebbe Maharash answered. So the Rebbe Maharash answered that there's a difference if it's just plain stones, or if it's sampirinin, or if it's expensive gems, or sapphire. That's what it is? Okay, it's expensive sapphire, so then it's something which has a lot of value. Every piece that falls, as we see, Moshe Rabbeinu got very rich from this. And therefore the Eibush just has to tell him that it belongs l'cha. But then the Rebbe goes on in the Sikha with a very lengthy discussion al Pinigla regarding this subject. And just one akuda I'll mention. The Rebbe asks that based on what it says here in the Mishnah, which we learned, the Gemara quotes it here, that when you're preparing your work, you're doing the work for the owner in the house of the owner, so then there's also no right for you to take anything, even by Misat Te'avanim. So the Rebbe Maharash could have also given a different answer, even if it was just plain stones, but because the work that Moshe Rabbeinu was doing is in the Eibishter's place. And the Rebbe explains that Lashem Aretz Maloya, wherever you are, you're in the Eibishter's domain. So what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing is in the Eibishter's place. So then, without Hashem clearly saying L'cha that you can keep this, it's something that has to go to the Eibishter. Okay, so the Rebbe basically explains that it's clear from the Gemara here regarding Misat Te'avanim that this distinction the Gemara makes regarding all kinds of workers, that it does matter whether you're doing it in your own shop or you're doing it in the home of the balabas that you're working for. That distinction does not apply regarding Misat Te'avanim. At least not according to the Braise that's quoted over here in the Gemara. And the Rebbe says an interesting thing. The Braise was taught in Bavel. In Bavel, there wasn't stones. The Rebbe brings from a place in the Gemara where it says that in Bavel they didn't have any stones there. So therefore the pieces that fall from the stones were not valuable at all. People didn't use stones to build with it. So therefore over there, it doesn't make a difference if you're doing this work in your own shop, you're doing it in the home of the balabas, it has no value. Similar, Moshe Rabbeinu was in the Midbar, where the Yidden are not using any stones for anything, other than the fact that it was sapphire. But if it would have just been plain stones, then this would have been something that even though it's in the domain of the Eibishter, Moshe Rabbeinu would be allowed to keep this, because it's not something that has any value at all. Doesn't matter even if it's in the domain of the balabas. That's one akudah that the Rebbe says in the Sikha al Pinigla. Then al Pichsidis, the Rebbe explains a very interesting and important vart. Just explain this since we're making here a Siyum of Bava Kama. So there's the famous Mishnah in the end of Baba Basra that says, B'chlal, regarding the Masechtas that we're learning now, Bava Kama, beginning Baba Metzia, Baba Basra. So the Mishnah in the end of Baba Basra says, if you want to be wise, you should learn these Masechtas that discuss all money matters, all disputes related to money matters. And the Mishnah there says that these subjects in Torah are a mayin and iveya. It's like a stream of water that flows endlessly. The depth and the wealth of the discussion and the pilpul that is involved in understanding these subjects in Torah is where you can see the wisdom of Torah and where a person becomes wise. That's what it says in the Mishnah. So the Rebbe here in the Sikha points out regarding the Luchas Shniyas, that the Luchas Shniyas have pseilas. The fact that Moshe Rabbeinu carves it out and it has pseilas, what that hints to is there's a big difference between the Luchas Shniyas and the first set of Luchas. The first set of Luchas were God made, and there's no pseilas there. It's just the Gilui of the Eibishter and it's all open and clear what it is, its connection to the Eibishter. In the second set of lucha is this psailes. What does that mean? Because here it's a different experience, a different level of learning Torah. It's where you learn Torah where there is a discussion. There's Eir, there's Chayshech, there's questions, there's answers. The Gemara tells us that together with the second set of luchas came the pilpul of Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, the Eibishter gave him a gift, the pilpul of Torah. What is the pilpul of Torah? The Dinei Mamonos, these mesechtas that you learn, the discussion, the questions back and forth. This is where you have the emek of Torah. On one hand, in the pilpul of Torah, there's sort of a big yirida here. You don't get the point and the oir of Torah directly and openly. It comes with a discussion, with questions and answers, where there's a big darkness involved in this. At the same time, though, dafke in this chelik of Torah is the biggest depth of Torah. The greatest depth of Torah is here, and the Chazal tell us that inside the lucha, inside the arein, that is, you had the luchais and the shivrei luchais. The broken luchas were there as well. When a person learns these chalakim of Torah, the pilpul of Torah, there's a tremendous mila in the depth of Torah that's here. There's another point also in the mila of the depth of the Torah that there is in these mesechtes, which is also hinted in the concept of the shivrei luchais. The broken luchais hints to something else, to bittul. When something is broken, it's bittul. That's what it is. When you learn these mesechtes, on one hand, there's tremendous depth and there's tremendous chachma that you get out of it. And there's a certain aspect of the learning here. These are the mesechtes that they learn in the yeshivas with the bachrim. This is the mesechtes where a person can feel like that he can get involved and say an opinion about it and think about it, because it's very deep and it's something that's engaging. At the same time, it's dafke, this kind of learning, with Alter Rebbe and Torah says a word about the pilpul of Torah, and specifically the Talmud Bavli, that there's a certain aspect of bittul that goes into it. When you learn these kinds of Gemaras, when you learn, take Masechta Brachas, try to learn Masechta Brachas, Daf Hey, Daf Vav, Daf Zayin, it's Geschmack, it's smooth, whether it's Agadat, whether it's just a plain Geschmack Gemara, there's no level of frustration that you have in the learning. It's good, it's Gates, it's smooth, it's Geschmack. When you learn Masechta Bava Kama, Masechta Bava Metzia, we're going to be learning now Bava Metzia. There's some very hard prokim in Bava Metzia. The first Perek is not an easy Perek. There's the famous Perek of Ezel Neshech, which speaks about the halachas of Rivis, which is not easy either. There's other parts in Bava Metzia. You learn these Masechtas, there's a certain level of frustration that goes into the learning. You get it, you don't get it, you're not sure you get it, you think you got it, and you realize you don't understand it. There's a bittul in this. On one hand, it's an interesting thing. It's two opposite things that you experience at the same time. On one hand, you see the tremendous depth of Torah, and there's a tremendous geschmack in it, and the appreciation of the learning, but at the same time, there's a tremendous level of bittul that goes into it. Those are the two opposite things in the psailes of the luchais that is hinted over here in the end of the Masechta, where it talks about the Masat Te'avonim. Okay, Mazel Tov everyone on the Siyum of the Masechta, and you should all go Machayil Al-Chayil, have Kayach to learn Masechta Bava Metzia, and continue learning everyone on their level. They should all give you Kayach, Nitzchus of the learning, you should have everything you need. B'bana Chayim, Ezayna Revicha, Begashmis, Beruchmis, B'toiv, Anirev, Anigla.